Welcome back, Rosebuds. Today we're telling stories about haunted hospitals of various kinds. We have 4 horrific haunted tales. For those of you who are new, we tell you a handful of stories that are true and 1 imposter story that is completely fictional. You can try and guess which of the following 4 tales are true and which one is made up. So make sure to listen all the way to the end where I will reveal which story was the imposter. So sit back, dim the lights, and settle in for 4 horrific haunted hospital tales to tell in the dark. Story number 1, Haunted Rehab. I went to a rehab that was believed to be haunted. Before it was the current rehab establishment, it was a different rehab, then a hospital, and a retirement home before that. The youth unit where I was located was the building's former ER. Some short tidbits about this place. Parts of the rehab were essentially abandoned and never furnished, so it still looked like a hospital. Hospital beds, etc. were still there. Several maintenance men refused to go back there at night because of creepy experiences. I can't lie, it did look creepy AF. One former youth patient made a Ouija board to try to talk to the ghosts. Supposedly, it worked. Can't confirm that, but one day, him and his roommate go back to their room and it's ransacked with writing on the mirror. The guy grabbed a Bible and started to pray but got nosebleeds every time he touched the Bible. An RA freaked out and blessed every room. She was fired and the patient transferred. This story was at least confirmed by my counselor to be true. One of the rules, which was so lame, no music was allowed. One day I walked into my room and there's the sound of a piano playing and voices like a party. I freaked out and went to go get my roommate, but as soon as both of us got back to the doorway, it all completely stopped. The RAs didn't believe us and said nothing could have possibly made that noise. On another day, we were cleaning all the rooms, and I went into one room to do something. I saw someone standing in the closet. I went to the bathroom, grabbed something, and went back to the group room. I was quite annoyed because I assumed it was another patient who was slacking off on their cleaning duties. Except everyone was in the main room, and no one had left. A girl who lived in that room at one time claimed her clothes in that closet often swung at night all on their own. My counselor confided in me that she believed the unit was haunted and told me to speak out loud and tell them to go away next time something happened. The next time I did this, and not even a minute later, 2 guys came out of their room screaming and freaking out. They claimed a pencil on a nightstand by their bed shot up and buried itself in the ceiling. Both guys refused to sleep in their room and moved on the spot. One of my last nights, I woke up very early in the morning, maybe 4, and saw a tall, ghostly white figure in the corner of my room. While I watched, the figure floated to my roommate's bed and stared down at her. I forced myself to go to sleep and didn't tell anyone about it. The next morning at breakfast, though, my roommate said she had a weird dream that night but wouldn't say what it was about. I asked her about it. Hadn't told her about my experience. She reluctantly told me that a tall, shadowy figure stood over her bed watching her sleep. It really creeped her out. That place is closed now, and good riddance. Story number 2, The Girl in the Window. I'm not a ghost enthusiast, and I actually prefer to stay as far away from the unknown as possible. I facilitate burials at a cemetery, but this is not about that. I mention this only to establish that no matter how hard I try to avoid it, I seem to be drawn back to the afterlife. With that being said, here's my story. Many years ago, while I was studying in college, I had established a friendship with a girl that lived on campus at a sorority. I was in a fraternal organization, but the house was off campus. I would occasionally take late-night walks around campus because it was quiet and sometimes I just needed to get out. One night, I believe it was probably just after dinner, I walked to the house that my friend stayed in, thinking I would ask her to go walking with me. Now, this was before cell phones were mainstream. It wasn't common to just give out phone numbers at that time, so calling wasn't an option. This was probably around 1998, which now seems like ages ago. The sun was starting to go down, but I don't remember it being too dark out. I approached the house and went up to the front door. I knocked a couple of times, thinking someone has to be wandering around since there were like 30 plus people living in this house. Well, no one answered. This seemed strange to me, and I decided to pop over and look in the window. I had been in the house before, and I knew that the lower windows looked into a dining area. I wasn't worried about accidentally seeing something I shouldn't. I walked over to the right side windows and looked in. There in the kitchen was a girl. I believe blonde and possibly wearing a nightgown, but I'm not sure because nothing about her stood out. To this day, I imagine her looking back at me, but I honestly don't know if she was even looking my way. At that moment, I immediately thought, oh great, someone to answer the door. So I went back to the door and knocked again. I waited for some time, still no answer. I knocked again and waited. No one ever answered my knocks. At this point, I decided to go on my way, figuring that no one was going to answer the door. Still thought this was strange. The next day, I had a class with my friend, and I told her, "Hey, I came by last night to see if you wanted to go on a walk." And her reply was this, "Oh, none of us were there. We were all at a rally." I exclaimed, "Well, someone was there because I saw a girl in the kitchen." She then said, "Oh, that was probably just the ghost." I then proceeded to ask about living in a house with a ghost. I didn't think she was serious at first because, to my surprise, this didn't seem to bother her. She insisted that this girl in a white gown just sometimes walked around, showed up, and they'd all gotten used to it since she never caused harm. Apparently, at some point, the building had been used as a hospital during World War I. It was explained to me that this girl was a nurse, and she worked at the hospital. I have no information to back this up, but this is what was said to me by the girls that live there. To this day, seeing that person in the kitchen haunts me, and I've tried every rational explanation to convince myself that what I saw wasn't a ghost, but I know in my heart it was real. Story number 3, Room 201. I was an ICU nurse at a hospital in the deep south of the USA. Understand that it's a stressful job, and there are quite a few deaths in this part of the hospital. I mean, ICU does stand for Intensive Care Unit because the patient is on the brink. When I transferred to this hospital, I was an atheist, and when I left, I wasn't as staunch about my beliefs as I once was. My coworker, who I'll call Melanie, was a sweet woman with a thick southern drawl, having grown up and lived there her whole life. She always tried to make incoming staff feel welcome. About a week after being there, she invited me to sit with her during a break. We were chatting, and she brought up how much she hated room 201 in the ICU. I asked her why, and she said she couldn't explain it, but to just keep my eyes open and be alert. I had no idea what she could mean by this. I mean, we were supposed to be on high alert with all patients in the ICU rooms. Sort of the nature of the job, right? Anyway, a few months go by, and I do in fact start to experience things to which I had no explanation. For one, the equipment in that room always seemed faulty. However, when we transfer it out, and a tech would come to retrieve it and fix it, They would return it promptly, saying there was nothing wrong with said monitor or whatever the tech happened to be. Even in those few months, it seemed like a terrible coincidence, but there were probably twice as many deaths in that room than any of the others. I started to get this irrational feeling of resistance to going in that room when I had to care for a patient. No other rooms, just that one. The pinnacle that would change me from being an atheist one day. I walk in and there's this dark, shadowy form hovering near the bedside of the patient. I blinked my eyes to make sure I didn't have any spots in them or something. No, there was definitely something in the room and it wasn't human. Then the monitor starts going off because the patient is flatlining. The staff moves into action and I'm trying my best to stay focused on what I need to do to save this person's life. But that shadowy form is still in the room when I glance to the side. The man died and then the black apparition left too. I can't explain that, but the feeling of dread that came over me when I saw this thing was beyond being able to put into words. I am long since retired from working as a nurse, but I will never forget ICU room 201. Story number 4, mental hospital. I was haunted by a suicide victim at the mental hospital I was at. I'll admit, I'm a guy with a lot of problems. I used to cut myself because of past relationships with girls, but this isn't about my life, it's about what happened. I was at a mental hospital we'll call Stonecrest. I stayed there for 40 days straight and it was hell. Kids there always attempted to take their life. They always screamed and cried for their parents. Some were always aggressive and tried to start fights. The food was horrible. Almost everything was cold and artificial, but at least they had an actual soda dispenser, which is something, I guess. The staff were nice enough. When the night shift came, I would always vent to them about my problems, and they were really cooperative. But every day was the same. You'd wake up, eat breakfast, do boring activities, have all the other meals, etc., do more activities, and lastly cry because of how horrible the day was, knowing that tomorrow's gonna be the same. Until one day this girl arrived. We'll call her Mary. She claimed to be a medium. I thought it was bullshit at first because almost all of the kids there were mentally disturbed, but now I realize that I think she might have been the real deal. I wasn't a people person back then, so I spent most of my time away from everyone else. A few hours passed, and I guess she got tired of waiting for me to introduce myself to her. She decided to introduce herself to me. She walks up and says, "Hello, my name is Mary. What's yours?" I told her my name, and we decided to talk for a while about why we were hospitalized. Nothing about her seemed abnormal, until she mentioned that she was a medium, and proclaimed to me that she sensed someone following me. I wasn't freaked out, but I was genuinely curious, so I asked her who. "He's not telling me a name, but he's standing right behind you." I got a bit of a chill and felt I'd had enough. I rushed out of the room and requested to be put in the quiet room, which is just a plain room with a bed where you can just lay down and chill out. I lay down on the bed for a couple of hours. All of a sudden, I heard talking in the bathroom, which was right by the quiet room. I was already about 15 days into this hospital stay, and I knew almost everyone's voice. This voice didn't fit any of the faces I was familiar with. It sounded deep and muffled, like a recording. The strangest part was that the door was open and the lights were off. My dumbass decided to approach the already suspicious voice, and I knocked twice. The talking stopped. I could only hear the air sifting through the vent in the background. I was feeling pretty scared, but I slowly opened the door and turned the light switch on. I was completely perplexed because no one was there. Nothing was out of the ordinary. The soap bottle and paper towels were brand new and untouched. I shrugged and chalked it up to talking coming from another room or the TV being on. I shut the light off and was about to leave. I took one last look into the dark bathroom, and suddenly I saw something in the mirror, a blue orb just floating there. At this point, I was really weirded out. I don't know how to explain it, but it was so hypnotic. I approached the mirror slowly, looked up at it, and what I saw made my blood run cold. With the sunlight peeking into the bathroom a bit, I could see my reflection, but there was also a black figure. It had absolutely no features, just a tall, shadowy shape of a man standing behind me. Then its outline started popping and moving around like an illusion. This kept on. I just continued staring. I didn't even realize how long I stared at this until one of the staff broke my trance. When I came out of it, it had been like 2 hours. I felt like my mind was frozen in time, seeing this thing over and over again, like a GIF. Now, I have to detour from my own story for a moment. I also had one friend while I was there. We'll call her Hannah. We're actually still friends to this day, but that's besides the point. I won't go into her backstory and why she was there. Hannah and I always played rummy, apples to apples, Uno, and card games like that. One day we were playing cards and talking about our hobbies. Then Mary decided to sit by us. I decided to tell Mary about what happened in the bathroom, and I shit you not, she didn't even look surprised. "Oh, yeah, I forgot he would do that," Mary said with a grin. Honestly, I was really pissed off that she found this amusing. I already had enough shit going on. The last thing I needed was a mystical being haunting me as well. I didn't say anything out loud to her, though. I just mentally told her to fuck off and gave her the cold shoulder. Hannah followed my lead. Later on, one of the staff announced that it was time for phone calls. I got up and decided I'd try to talk to my dad. Honestly, I didn't get along with him at the time, but hey, we were trying to make amends. I waited in line outside the day room, and out of nowhere, I start to feel stinging in my left shoulder. It felt like a needle or knife being jabbed into my flesh. Obviously no knife or blood, but sure felt like the burning feeling of it. I let out a short, muffled scream, and thankfully no one said a word. I was panicking and squeezing my shoulder. The staff kept on going. By now the knife or needle would feel like it was in the bone. I looked around, but my vision was blurry. I saw Hannah and could have swore she too was holding her shoulder and looked to be in pain. We both quickly went back inside the day room. Hannah and I were comparing our strange phenomenon when, you guessed it, Mary sat down by us again. She said rather cryptically, "He died from cutting himself with a steak knife." We didn't know how to respond. We both looked at her feeling pissed and scared. I said to her, "What is this? What the fuck are you doing?" I had the sudden urge to grab her by the neck, but restrained myself. She responded, "Hey, I'm not doing anything. He's been following you for a while now." I had had enough. I didn't believe her because it was awfully convenient that these strange things only happened after she got there. I yelled at her, "You better stop this shit before I—" At this point, two things happened. The staff came running in, and I felt the stab again, this time on my right cheek. Hannah and I both let out a scream and began to cry. For the remainder of my 25 days there, it was the worst. Hannah and I didn't talk to Mary again. We kept feeling that random stabbing feeling on various areas of our bodies, sometimes when we were together and sometimes apart. Maybe we should have told the staff, but both of us knew it wasn't medical, and being in a hospital that was basically a psych ward, that would have surely extended our stay. So no, we didn't tell anyone. I'll tell you one thing, I'm not crazy. We're not crazy because we both feel the stabs, even slightly, to this day. Well, Rosebuds, did you guess which story was made up entirely by yours truly? Before I do that reveal, tell us what you think about hospitals being haunted. Do you think it's all in our imagination, or do you think that the dead linger there sometimes? Also, if you want to see our channel grow so we can do this full time and keep releasing great content, give us a thumbs up and maybe share this episode with a friend. Alright, let's do our reveal. Today's fictional story was story number 3, Room 201, about the ICU nurse who felt that the one room in particular had some odd paranormal happenings. I honestly can't remember, but at some point someone told me a story sort of like this. The thing is, I couldn't remember if it was made up or true, so I was inspired to write a fictional story from that vague memory. Well, that's a wrap, Rosebuds. Until next time, thanks for listening. Take care and stay creepy.